Welcome to the Authority Podcast, Plumbing and Mechanical. When talking about the built environment, we would do well to remember, we shape our buildings, and afterwards, our buildings shape us. Therefore, on each episode, we'll discuss the latest trends from IAPMO in plumbing and mechanical safety, sustainability, and resiliency. Join me, your host, Christoph Lohr, and together we'll explore the ways we can make our buildings shape us for the better. And welcome back to the Authority Podcast, Plumbing and Mechanical. I'm your host, Christoph Lohr. And on this insightful episode, we're going to delve into the reconstruction journey of Paradise, California, following the devastating Camp Fire in 2019 that destroyed more than 18,000 structures and killed 85 people. Our guest, Tony Lindsey, Paradise building official and fire marshal who lost his own home in the disaster, shares exclusive insights into the challenges, innovations, and resilience efforts, and shares specifics that shaped the town's water infrastructure revival. Tony, it is great to have you on the episode. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Well, thanks for having me. I looking forward to speaking with you.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to learning from you. Well, let's dive right in. So take us back to the morning of the campfire. Can you describe to our listeners the initial challenges you faced, especially with the responsibility of both saving and evacuating the town?
Well, it definitely was a challenge. That morning, I worked for a community that was just down the ridge for the city of Chico. I was serving as Chico Fire Marshal at the time, kind of serving both jurisdictions. And when my wife had talked to me, I looked in the rearview mirror, headed down in the morning. It was just a plume of smoke coming back, and it's like we are accustomed to the fires right out here. And then, a couple hours later, we found out it was blowing up. I responded up the hill and tied into the town of Paradise's emergency operations center as well, and gave them field intel of what was happening as we are starting to evacuate and then fully evacuate the town. Then it was pitch black. We had so much smoke and ash falling, through that town and through the rest of the day. I ended up coming up here about 9:00, and I left the town around 5 p.m. That afternoon. So it was. You can only imagine. You don't really plan for these worst case scenarios when you're evacuating certain zones, but then when you have to dump a town of 28,000 people, as well as we serve a community above us for about 15 to 20, another 20,000, and when they're trying to evacuate, and we live on a cul-de-sac essentially, so there's a couple ways in and only a couple ways out. And so that was, and a lot of people have already, heard the story and the horrors of, the power lines catching on fire, dropping line, hurting and crippling our evacuation routes. And there was very little structure protection happening. So that, promulgated the conflagration of fires, houses catching other houses on fire, and then essentially burning down 80% of the town.
And from your own home being lost in disaster, I mean, did that personal loss of your home impact your approach to the recovery and rebuilding efforts then later on in Paradise?
Well, I think it made me feel more committed to rebuilding the town. Wanting to, rebuild my life as well as the life of my family. Because we all made it out safely. So that was, a blessing out of it. But then we were fragmented, right? So luckily the college took in the Chico State College, opened up their student housing for the students that had lost their homes. And then we ended up, couch surfing for a little bit. And so we eventually found, a place that we could get our whole family to. And then shortly thereafter, I was lucky. My wife was staunch support, and I was working because nonetheless, after the fire, you're looking at structural assessment procedures and running teams for the town in that regard. So I worked, 3 months straight after the fire, we were trying to assemble the town and repopulate it as much as we could at that particular time. So dedicated. Obviously, it led me to wanting to come back and work, completely for the town. And luckily, 3 years after, the town offered me a position and brought me back.
Excellent. Well, it's amazing to hear, the steps and everything you went through, and coming back. I mean, when you came back to, to Paradise, can you describe some of the challenges maybe faced by the town of Paradise in its water infrastructure after the campfire and the steps taken to ensure clean and safe water for the community?
Well, you can imagine if you have 80% of your town burned down, you just have open faucets, right? Open spigots going out there, and that really, depleted the water source, and we melted many lines underground. And with the open faucets, and it really allowed the water pressure to decrease and allowed contaminants to get in the main systems, the main arteries of the water system. And we are on the Paradise Irrigation District that serves the town is a gravity system. So they don't have, I think they have all but 2 pumps on the entire town serving the community. As well, it's a complicated system with 7 different zones, pressure zones. They rely on tanks to maintain the pressure. It's a little different than living in a flat area like we had down in Chico. That was a consistent water pressure flow. You would count on 65 psi all throughout the town. Here we go from 100 psi at the bottom, and then very little at the top of a particular zone. Right, you may have little pressure, little pressure and a lot of volume. Then you get down to the bottom, you have a high pressure and lower volumes. So the infrastructure for the irrigation district was crippled due to all the melted pipes, all the laterals to the homes were melted and gone, and or melted, decayed. They're still in the ground.
Gotcha. So you had mentioned contamination from the water side. What initiatives were implemented to address that water contamination issue and ensuring the protection?
Obviously, you heard about benzene gets in the water lines, so that's just really a constant flushing. So they were dumping millions of gallons of water out, and then through grants the water district received, they have, which is a little unique to our community now. Every home has a backflow device at the street. So it goes from a meter to a backflow device that either the water purveyor maintains, or the resident, the ratepayer has to absorb that cost of maintaining that backflow annually. So that's a little unique, and it kind of stems through talking to IAPMO professionals. You would know that once you put a backflow on a residential house, it creates a closed loop system. And so then that requires the expansion tanks on the water heaters and additional costs when you're talking about rebuilding.
Gotcha. So, I mean, that obviously sounds like some significant changes made to especially residential water systems post disaster. Was there any that you're aware of, any other adaptations to water system design or materials to meet higher safety standards to mitigate potential risks of future contamination or system failures that you're aware of?
Well, sure. Some of the water tanks were just bladders, very large bladders, out there, and they have now fortified, their water system with, real your typical traditional water tank. It's we don't have any that are sitting up tall because we're on a hilly terrain. So just the topography of our town lends itself to having a water tank basically at grade level and to feed the downstream um, need, I guess. And then replacing the water mains. Looking at getting them deeper. I think thing helped, and just replacing some really antiquated pipe out there. Yeah, if you have a 4-inch main serving in the ground for 50 years, that inner diameter of that pipe kind of gets smaller, right,
Yeah,
over time. And so they have certainly been upgrading the system to serve our community.
that's great to hear. Well, on the back end, in working with FEMA on some of these recovery efforts, did you encounter any impediments based on the codes the town uses during your construction practices?
FEMA has been good to work with, but like any governmental agency, it's just slow, right? The town has been benefited greatly from USDA, from FEMA, HCD, and there's a bunch of acronyms for grants that we've received to help rebuild really the infrastructure. As far as streets and getting all our utilities undergrounded is fortunate, as well as helping those that have lost homes rebuild, like with rebuild assistance, first time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and actually building homes for people. There's another one, Recover California, that is also many of the people that lost their homes have benefited from using those resources.
Gotcha. So, I mean, it sounds like there's obviously the normal, anytime you're dealing with a large organization, right? It's a big ship. It takes it takes a lot of time to respond to things. And so that would be, I think, maybe to be expected. But as far as, what codes you were using, there was nothing really that I'm hearing from you that would cause any impediments in terms of, in working with FEMA, nothing that had happened there.
Not with FEMA. I mean, we use all current building standards, and that's one of the things they're looking for. Right? How are we, rebuilding to be, they be more resilient. We were before the fire. We were in a wildfire, very high fire hazard severity zone, and we were building to, people are familiar with Chapter 7A or the wildland urban interface materials and methods of construction.
Makes sense. Well, lastly, having experienced such intense personal and professional challenges, what advice would you give to officials in other regions who might face similar catastrophic events?
I guess when planning for types of emergencies, we all go through these plannings and EOC drills. You have to basically plan for the worst times 10. And, kind of gear yourself to the worst case scenarios, compensating and planning for, like a snow emergency, right? I mean, sometimes you'll be like, oh, you got snow, you got, plowing, you're shut down, roofs are loading. But you focus on, how can you maintain the citizens, and how do we get them, once we get them out of a town and start the recovery, how do we get them back in? And so you kind of have to loop all around. And I think with these catastrophes that we've had, just lately, the Hawaii fire, it's kind of maybe Paradise provided a boilerplate for how these operations work. We made mistakes. We came back, but how you kind of formulate in. You got this one, you got Santa Rosa, and this is just the fires, right? And it's the same with down south, with the floods, and tornadoes as well. I mean, it's fires are just one of many catastrophes that can happen and fall on the community.
Definitely. Well, Tony, on behalf of the Authority Podcast, Plumbing, Mechanical, and IATMO, I just want to say thanks for taking more time out of your schedule for us. We had a great article in the official magazine that our readers should be able to link to if they want to learn more. And just want to say thank you, Tony, for sharing your expertise and insights and experience with myself and our listeners here today. And thanks for all you do.
Well, thanks for having me. Am I always available for anybody if they want to look me up and ask me any questions? Thank you.
Excellent. Is there a good contact way for them to contact you? Email?
Yeah, you can go through email, and it's just tlindsey@townofparadise.com.
Excellent. Well, Tony, thanks again so much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the Authority Podcast, Plumbing and Mechanical. Love this episode of the podcast? Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Please follow us on Twitter @AuthorityPM, on Instagram @TheAuthorityPodcast, or email us at iatmo@iatmo.org. Join us next time for another episode of the Authority Podcast, Plumbing and Mechanical. In the meantime, let's work together to make our buildings more resilient and shape us for the better.